I always bring my purse as if, like,
You have to run off.
I don't know, might need to go. Yeah.
Let's see how it goes. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not.
Welcome, Miranda. Thank you for doing this.
Yes.
We have quite a lot of ground to cover, but we're probably going to talk for about 45 minutes or so and then have questions. But Miranda wants to show some clips, which she will do randomly through our chat.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure when. She hasn't even told me.
Me either,
But,
yeah.
We'll see how it goes. But anyway, I suppose to begin with, you know what the idea is more or less because Michael told you. We were going to do a show of hands of people
Who
that have been.
has anyone in here been in the shop?
Anyone?
Where's-
That's quite good.
Aw, that's a nice feeling.
You've still got to
Thank
Sunday,
you.
remember?
Is anyone here wearing something they bought in the shop? Oh, that's extra sweet. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's start, I suppose. I'm interested primarily, well, to begin with, is how you came across the idea or had the idea, but because I know you were in Britain for quite a long time researching things and you were all over the place in London, weren't you?
Right, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. This was like the dream invitation for Michael Morris to say, would you like to do a project with Artangel? So many pieces that I loved for so long, including work by you, have been Artangel projects. And it took a while. I proposed a number of things, and it's not that any of those things were turned down or something. Michael doesn't really do that. But they just didn't feel like it. And then, there is this awkwardness to when you're doing something in another country. You're just automatically wrong. You don't get it because, you don't live there. And so on one trip, I just spent a while hanging out here. I sang with a choir in Croydon. I went to a refugee day center in a church basement. I went to a Townswomen's Guild meeting. You guys know what that is? Yeah.
What happens at that?
Like older women sit and drink tea. I don't. It's like I literally can't remember one thing they said. I think I was just consumed by all the things I couldn't say, and like imagining what it was. But what do you do with that time in your life? They weren't sure.
Yeah.
They were assessing their options. An LGBT group, and what I began to feel was like, well, of course there are already all these pre-existing groups, because some of my ideas had been about to start a group or, make various monuments or performances to make a thing, out of my own brilliance and inventiveness. And one idea was to make a store and to somehow make weird things to sell in that store, because I have an interest in commerce and money. And then after spending that time here, I thought, is it possible that an art piece could be just me kind of giving my resources to a pre-existing group or groups? Like, could that be art? Which includes, in this case, Artangel and then eventually Selfridges. And that's not ultimately what I found to be interesting or even like at the core of this piece. But it was the initial idea that you don't need to geniusly author something every time. And that, for me, that's an important distinction, because I write fiction, I make movies, that this was a different way into conceptualizing something that ultimately was quite familiar to me and was like a lot of my work.
So you're basically using your power or influence as an artist to make something like this happen?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, it's the kind of thing that's like not super appealing to talk about, but trying to do, I think I'd come off of like my one only, these like brand collaborations, like so-and-so times so-and-so, that's like so hot right now. Like, if I kept getting asked to do those things, and I did one with Miu Miu, this luxury brand, and I felt good about the work, like it kind of merited that, but it did leave me kind of with this feeling like, wow, what is there to do with that? This is kind of a side point, but with the world of like luxury, like it's pretty uncomfortable for this like old riot girl, and yet there's some way to use that invitation, that kind of pop appeal. There must be some use for it as just a material like paint or anything else. So in a way, that was part of my sort of mental way into Selfridges.
And the whole charity shop phenomenon, as I will call it.
Right.
Tell us about how you got into that or you discovered that.
Yeah, I thought, at a certain point on like one frazzled day, I was like, what do I know? Like, what is in my heart, in my own experience about London, having come many times, since I was 20, and I was like, well, I've gone to a lot of charity shops. Like, I'm kind of an expert on those. Does that count? And so then I just Googled charity shops. I was just like, this is probably a blind alley. And at that point, I saw the Islamic Relief one, and that stuck out to me as an American because, we don't have any Muslim charity shops, or really any charity shops that aren't Christian. They kind of dominate that field. And then I really started looking at all of them, and I was just like, seems so British to me that there would be every faith, every malady, every kind of suffering, essentially, in the form of a charity shop. And that seemed like a valid way in. Also because I liked it, it was, both, served the purpose of truly being British to me, at least from my point of view. It had the big question mark of like the Islamic Relief. Part of it was like really attractive to me because that is a very small, comparatively small population in the U.S., the Muslim population compared to here, so it right away suggested a community that I wasn't familiar with and wouldn't be unless I, did a project like this.
And you were telling me earlier you used to work in a charity shop when you were
Yeah, right. And also my very first job was at the Goodwill Superstore in Portland. This is that point where one person goes like, woo! Except there is not that person here. Oh well. And yeah, so that was, I did have a little bit of an insidery feeling, like I knew.
In the retail sector.
Yeah, in the retail sector, and also in that economy of like so much stuff being donated, so much of it not actually being usable, and how you sort it, and stuff being dirty. It's the whole world of like donated goods it's like a pretty grimy world. Yeah.
Did you bring any of that experience to this project?
Gosh, wouldn't Goodwill be so proud today if I said yes? I, in fact, was fired from that job. But sure, I guess just in an appreciation, like a genuine love and belief in that economy. And all the sort of obvious corny things there are to say about reuse, I still believe,
So the idea is quite straightforward really, isn't it? If you think about it, what you're doing. And maybe because you're not from Britain, I think often when artists work in different countries, they can sort of blunder in and do things that artists from that country wouldn't be able to do necessarily. Go to places where other people would say, well, no, actually we can't really do that because of this, that and the other. But maybe that's what's happening here as well. You're doing this very quite severe juxtaposition between these two retail worlds, and that's obviously something that massively appealed to you.
Right. I know. I've been waiting for someone to say this was a blunder.
But I mean
are you saying that now?
It's a good blunder.
Okay.
I do lots of blunders as well. I'm seeing it.
Okay. Yeah. it is that kind of thing where you just keep asking, it's like first we went to each of the charities and asked them, and sort of each step of the way, me and Michael were waiting to see, like, is anyone going to be like, absolutely not, because of Law 365 and the whatever, and then we'd be like, oh, of course that's why this doesn't exist, and it's sort of two parts of why it doesn't exist. It's because these four faiths working together and literally doing work, together, that doesn't naturally occur without it being someone's idea to make it happen, and wasn't always easy. There is something very utopic about the store, but it's not a naturally occurring store. There were a lot of conversations. Initially, one charity dropped out because they basically, were offended on some level by it. And even the Selfridges part, they were an ideal partner, really the only store that would have done this. But still, the idea of religion in a store, in a full-on capitalist store, and a little bit of politics, as you were saying, those initial conversations with them were very kind of philosophical, just on the level of what does this mean? Why do this? It felt very uncharted for everyone involved.
But they asked, those are good questions to ask, though.
Yeah, they were really smart. They were, I felt very on my toes. I'd get an email from Alana Weston, the head of Selfridges, and I'd be like, shit. I do not actually know the answer to that question, which is what you want.
For the conversations with the charities, were they much easier and people were more accepting of the idea and liked the idea on the whole?
Well, yes. On the whole, yes. Not every, it took a little while to find the right charities, and initially some charities that we didn't work with seemed to only see it as a money-making promotional thing that, we were looking for people who were kind of in it for the unknown aspect too, because that's all we could promise. We don't exactly know. Could backfire,
How did it do in terms of money making, if I can ask that?
Yeah, we don't have our final, we haven't finished yet, tally, but I know that on a good day we make about what a normal charity shop makes in a week. Wow. So that's on a good day. And Selfridges itself has radical weather patterns, we've learned. So that's been interesting to see. There's bad days too, but overall, it's like being on a very busy street all the time, yeah.
In terms of how you have designed it, how much attention did you pay to that? Was that all you? Were you very clear about what you wanted the shop to look like and feel like?
Yeah, yes. It's recently been pointed out. I'm sort of glancing at Marina from Artangel, who we would have exchanges even as recently as last week, where I was like, no, not those stars. This was for the £1 sale. And, she's like, we ordered these stickers, these stars for the, and I was like, no, we need them to be handwritten because those have already been used in fashion and art, those kind of, although actually, I won't even get into that. It's way too tight. But every single thing, that mat, Sam will remember that mat was something I saw in Islamic Relief really right before we built it, the day before, and I was like, can we get it? Can we have a mat like that? And to me, I realized oh, that's what delineates that you've just come in from outside, and there's a little doorbell that goes, ding, ding, when you come in, and me and Marina just happened to see that, the same week we opened at the store where we were buying some hooks and things like that. So, and then really, as far as the flooring, the slat wall where you can put in hooks, the way things are arranged, the risers, the wood, the color of the wood, the ceiling, which, you know, it's all these things are so basic you just don't notice them at all, but the ceiling is like a little masterpiece, and with its own, you know, fire sprinkler system built into it, because of course we had to be very up to code. So all these things were modeled on a kind of, sort of the emphasis was on the Islamic Relief charity shop, but, you know, as happens, everyone's trying to be more modern, and this charity shop is like slightly unsophisticated, and, you know, I'd walk into Islamic Relief and I'd be like, what'd you do with your lighting? It's all fancy now. Like, what happened? Like, last month you had this kind of lighting, and I can't begrudge them that it looks nicer now. But I think, you know, just as when you're making a movie, with production design, you often, to create a sense of now and of something recognizable, you have to step back, not into something that feels retro, but just into something that has a vernacular that everyone can understand really identifiably. So, and it worked. People would step off the escalator, and say charity shop.
Yeah.
Oh, charity shop.
For me, I mean, there's almost like a sci-fi quality to it. When you're in Selfridges and you have all this other stuff going on, and you come across this, it's almost like something. I know this might sound a bit odd, but there's scenes in 2001 where they walks into a room and it's all set up in a different way, and it has this total sort of futuristic feel to it in a strange way.
Oh, good.
But you obviously took a lot of care over it. I suppose that's what I'm saying, because you could have just had stuff on racks that is second-hand or whatever, but you went for the whole production, didn't you?
Yeah, I loved that. Yeah, and the great thing is, I mean, you do this with a movie, and then you act out some made-up stuff, and then you move on. You know, so the fact that real life got to happen here in this kind of fictional space really made it worth the trouble. You know, I mean, it would, for me, it's like the best use of a set ever.
Talking about performing, you spent quite a lot of time in the shop when it was up and running.
Right.
And you did films online and stuff.
Right.
And so you were sort of performing as well in a little way. Do you feel that?
Right. I know, I really struggled. I mean, initially I was very clear-cut about, like, I'm not going to do anything performery around this, because I want it to be clear what the art is. The art is this store and the people working in it from each of these, you know, religious charities, and the shoppers themselves are the work, and the clothes are the work, and I, in some sort of performer stance, I'm not the work. And that can be a little confusing, because I do perform in some of my things. And I really stuck to that. There's, you know, different ideas we had, like, should I make an ad for the store, you know, like, with me before it opens? No. But then I guess once it opened, and I was really kind of riveted by what I was seeing each day, all the interactions and stuff, and started filming them and, you know, putting them on Instagram, I realized, well, it's not that I'm performing, but I am who I am, and, like, maybe hiding my enthusiasm is silly. And who cares if it's uncool, you know? Like, I think I wanted to be, like, a cooler art person, or how I imagined that is. But in the end, I always opt for the thing that's gonna, like, make the most people feel invited. And so, like, probably like 10 art people blew me off at that moment. Not in here, none of us, but I just mean some imagined ghosts that I'm fighting. And that was fun. And with a project like this, because it's just a constantly changing casting, because it's not me. I mean, I don't even work there. I don't know how to work the till. You know, I don't, like, it is really made alive by the shop assistants, and Diana, the shop manager, and Maggie, deputy shop manager, and Sophie. Like, these people are easy for me to celebrate, you know? And so, as well as the customers, you know, this kind of ever-changing cast that it seemed like maybe me as an audience member was like a useful part of the piece.
I think because I used to work in a shop, and you do feel like you're sort of performing a role in a shop, aren't you? And you are kind of performing as well. You're on show.
Right.
You never know who's going to walk in and what's going to happen. So you're sort of improvising almost a lot of the time. I do recommend going online and seeing Miranda did a series of makeovers. We're not going to see those in the clips, are we?
Oh, no. Yeah, these were like during Freeze. We invited some artists in, and they're not called makeovers.
Oh, what are they called? Sorry.
They're called personal shop.
Oh,
like
okay.
I'm doing personal shopping,
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
Was the idea.
That's much better.
In the loosest sense. Those are on the art newspaper website.
The Marcus Coates one is particularly good. He's like a sort of slightly grumpy, befuddled English man trying to shop and not doing very well.
Yeah, people like that one. I don't know why.
Yeah, I can relate to him massively. Should we see some footage?
Oh my goodness,
like
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh shoot. Okay. Okay. So these, I just put these like kind of random. D, was D the letter? Yeah, but what was Command F? Yeah. Okay. I just put these. Okay, we'll just go. Because sometimes people did not come in.
So do you like that condition?
If I could carry them, I'll take them. It depends if I can carry them.
Okay.
So we'll just see. Because that one's quite.
I am going to put inside.
And what are you buying today?
The Quran.
Ah.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I like the wording. You know, I use it on some children when I'm Christmas and birthdays.
Oh, like you'll read them something from the Quran?
No, we'll write it in their card, a scripture.
Oh, I see. So
It
you
sounds
give
very
it.
beautiful when you write it in a card.
Just tap your card there for me when you're ready. Oh, pop it right in the bottom there for me. You should be ready to enter your PIN now.
And what brought you into Selfridges today?
Oh, I come every week, and I just look for bargains. I look for bargain. Right now, I'm looking for Christmas stuff for Christmas.
Right.
It's not the shop I'd go to look for bargains, personally. Anyway. For you, I mean, this is like a big question. You sort of answered it almost just now, but where is the art in this piece? I know it's was it in the planning of it, or?
Well, initially I did think, and I kept saying to Michael, like, this is the art. Like, I know this is uncomfortable, and we're having to, make compromises sometimes, but these conversations, like, this is the art. And then, making the actual physical object, I was like, this is art. Wow, this is like a real sculpture here. And then once it opened, I really realized, oh, this is so similar to so many audience participatory works that I've made, except that I've just kind of created the situation being, you're walking through this like luxury department store, you come upon something that shouldn't be there, you go inside, you see prices that shouldn't be there, you interact with these people who this is not where they usually work, they don't usually work together. All these things are authored, basically, as much as, a performance I might create, but then I just step back. Instead of like trying to get people to do things, they already know how to shop. They do it really well. And it's a very intimate thing, shopping. They take off their clothes, they show each other what they look, they talk about their bodies. Mothers and daughters do it, groups of girls do it, whole families do it. And then there's all kinds of emotional relationships to money, you know, that go quite deep, you know, like most of our relationships to money began as a child, you know, and even if your circumstance changes, you still have this kind of like fucked up thing from your past. And so all that, I realized, like the fact that I can step back and it's this living thing that's constantly changing all day long into the night, that's the piece. And once I realized that, I got quite desperate about trying to document it. Because I would go in being like, okay, I'm going to give it a good 3 hours and just like shoot what I can shoot. And like, you know, 7 or 8 hours later, I'd be like, oh, but just one more. I just want to see what the next rush brings. There's usually a rush around now here, right? Mm-hmm. And I, yeah, I mean, it is ephemeral too. Like some of that feeling is not quite being able to, I know this feeling from other pieces that, you know, you made a thing that isn't sellable, it isn't havable, you know. You can buy artifacts in this particular one, that's kind of nice, souvenirs, but yeah, that it just, that's it, the experience of shopping there, and ultimately, I think that's enough.
Okay. It's that, for me, I suppose the idea of you set up a situation,
yeah,
and then you kind of lose control of it because the public come in and they mess it up for you, basically, and they do things you're not expecting, and that's quite exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think anyone working there will be like, well, she does try and maintain control. I mean, every week, for example, video, Sophie, one of our deputy shop managers, sends me a video narrating and showing me what she's done with each window, each mannequin and the window displays. And she has a really like great narrative about what it all means. And I live for those. And I sometimes am like, I loved it. So anyways, this guy is just like too much denim. And like I do give feedback from afar every week.
Via Skype.
Sometimes, this is when I've been really obsessive, I've looked to see this store, things people weren't showing me on other people's Instagrams. Like I'd hunt for my name and I'd suddenly in this like really sneaky way be like emailing Diana, our shop manager, and being like, so I see everyone in the, wait, what are you doing with that back wall? I see you're knotting the scarves. Did we talk about knotting the scarves? And she's probably like, what? Where are you?
So your attention to detail is quite
that's
intense.
such a great way of putting it.
Yeah. Thank you. Rather than blundering in. I'm sorry about that earlier. Are there any stories that happened that when you weren't there that you wish you'd experienced or you'd witnessed or filmed?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd brought some of these to show, but I did ask the shop assistants to make video diaries for me when interesting things happened, and some of those are written and some they would go into the stock room and shoot themselves. Some of them are on my Instagram. And yeah, so many things. I mean, right, obviously most of the things that happened I wasn't there for. And, but yeah.
What will happen to that footage? Are you thinking of making a film or doing?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're gonna make nothing massive, but like a short documentary of it. Just because after a while you realize, as I'm sure you do with these pieces, that becomes how most people know the work.
Yeah.
So that's fine. Trying to make that as good as possible, and some of it is a little bit will be stuff I shot, but much more beautifully shot is the stuff I'm shooting with Hugo Glendenning. Yeah.
Did anything go wrong that you would like to have changed in terms of the experience? That's a tough question.
Yeah, it's kind of like thinking about your own past. You know, you're like, well, that was horrible, but then who would I be if, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. You talked a bit about the tension around the work, which I think is actually a very interesting thing. About the tension with religion, but also commerce, and having that very specific sort of shop within that environment. Was that was something you were always interested in, clearly?
Right. Did you say attention?
Tension.
Oh, tension.
Tension, not
That
acting.
makes more sense. Yeah. Yeah. I know. I was just so curious. We all were. We were like, what happens when there's stuff this cheap in a store like that? And the Selfridges people would actually like the numbers guy would like run some figures, and we'd be like, how are you running these figures? Like sort of projections on how much we were going to make, or how many, because we had to decide like how many bags to order and stuff like that. And we were like, their theory was sort of anything under $20 just would sell automatically or something. I don't know. Yeah, I'm trying to think of something anecdotal. Well, I mean, partly why I wanted to show like that woman with all the bags was, some people almost had a kind of hysteria, around it. And then you realize a lot of the people who go into Selfridges don't have a lot of money. There's people going as tourists who are going to buy like the smallest, cheapest thing and get that yellow bag. And there's a lot of teenagers. I don't know if there's any in this next clip, but maybe I should show a clip.
Let's see if there are.
Okay, there might be some teenagers in here. I don't know. May I ask?
Yeah, when she comes in.
May I ask what brought you in today?
Sorry?
May I ask what brought you in today?
Oh, my daughter, I think you have to ask her. She's the person who brought me in.
Okay, I'll ask her. Excuse me. May I ask what brought you and your mother in today?
I read your article.
Oh, okay.
You're the
I am the artist. I'm trying to be subtle, but
it's only because I recognize your photo.
okay.
But I like the idea of it. Don't know if I'm right, but you said or the article was saying about, in my mind, the juxtaposition of the expensive prices and the cheap prices.
Sure.
I guess it can make people think. And I really like that. That's about it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Well, this is my niece.
Your niece. Okay.
This is my son. And my daughter's in the
She's
changing room
in
trying
the changing room. Okay.
those red leathers.
Do you have something you want her to see?
Show them off, Alice. Go
No.
Can you show us or no? Not certainly not with me here.
Alice, can I see?
Yeah, come.
Wait, Alice, let me see.
No, but they're so tight, they're literally going so okay.
That's great, that last one. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
The idea of putting something that's overtly religious in a shop, you talked about it a little bit earlier. Was that something that obviously must have appealed to you?
Well, I mean, I think what was going on with me with the religion thing, because gosh, definitely haven't done anything religious before at all. I just started to think that maybe that was kind of provincial of me to just be like, oh, I'm not interested, in religion. And it's like, well, sure, you're not going to convert, but most of the people in the world are religious, so are you just not interested in them or, what they might be fighting about or, and then, as I started to take baby steps towards this, I got really uncomfortable, especially around just anything Muslim. And I talked actually to a scholar of Islam, and said, like, really, I don't feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to do anything that gets anywhere near this religion. Like, I'm half Jewish and half Christian, so that's sort of convenient. I can kind of cover those, and I've meditated quite a bit. I don't know. But this one, and he said, well, if you have to be an expert to have solidarity with a group that's harassed, then that's kind of meaningless, that solidarity. And that actually clicked for me in a new way as I've been reading all these people saying, like, well, as a father with a daughter, I can't stand for this kind of sexual assault. And it's like, oh, really? You have to, own one of us to be able to stand with us? Like, otherwise you just would have no horse in this race. And I just, like, that's just one easy way for me as a woman to get my head around, like, right. In fact, maybe it's important to not be an expert, to not, to simply be saying, like, I think that I can see the ways that it would be hard to be part of this population right now, and I stand with them and their right to practice their religion, and the name of the store speaks to that.
In solidarity.
In solidarity with. So
Yeah.
those three religions are in solidarity with Islamic Relief, and who ironically is like much bigger than the other three charities, which are much more kind of regional. And Islamic Relief is like a worldwide NGO, like going places that governments can't even get into in Aleppo and stuff. But, is nonetheless audited, in ways that speak to Islamophobia and just fear. And when we first met with them, Imran Madden, the head of Islamic Relief here in the UK, said, like, yeah, if we just change our name, it'd be so much easier, which was so kind of heartbreaking. And the day that we first introduced him to the team at Selfridges, and he went in for a meeting, he brought his briefcase with all their tax information, all the audit, proving that their money went where they said it went to. And Michael said, Imran, you don't have to do that. And it really kind of broke our hearts that was, like, maybe he does. We don't know.
Probably does to every meeting.
He does for every meeting. It's like, that's the first question. Like, is this, funding terrorism? So that's where we are at right now. In another moment in history, they might not have been the ones that the others were in solidarity with, but right this second, in this moment when I made this project, that made sense. It made sense if you were going to go through the trouble to make something interfaith, that you might do it for a reason like that spoke to the current climate. Okay, so that's my answer.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you. And we probably should go to questions relatively soon.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and you wanted to read out the...
Yes, I did. I just, I know that thank yous just are what they are, but it's also can give you a little bit of an understanding of this project. Of course, I've mentioned the people I worked with at Artangel most, Sam and Marina and Michael, who, we just all bled into this. And I'm so grateful to have done that with them. But there's all these shop assistants who are not here, and they are what make it alive. And also, each of these charities gave their stock knowing that the proceeds would be divided in 4, so it's a kind of leap of faith to give, like, your best stock. But we didn't talk about that, the intricacies of the stock, but whatever, maybe someone will ask that in a question. No pressure. Anyways, so I just wanted to thank those people, and for you to think about how each of them works both in their charity shop and will continue to work in their shop after the 22nd, but they have worked in our shop for the last 6 weeks. From Norwood, the Jewish charity, Jenny Warren, I'm not going to say last names, Jenny, Natasha, Harvey, Tony, Sharon, Kathy, Candace, Susan, Serena, Selena, Tim, Ian, Laura, Leslie, Katie, and Donna. From Lama's Pajamas, which is the London Buddhist Center charity shop, Ruda, Nikki, Sarah, Abhiyanandi, and Sally. From Islamic Relief, Aisha, Shanaz, Latifa, Jan, Hanifa, and Afra. And from SCT, just Jasmine. Working a lot of shifts.
Maybe we should have a round of applause though.
Yes.
So should we watch the last clips? And
Okay,
then go to
yeah, is it
questions?
just one? Yeah. Can I video you guys?
I'm Becky.
Hi,
Nice to be
good
right.
to
Nice to
meet
see
you.
you. You okay? I just came
Yeah.
to have a look, so I
Yeah,
haven't got a
what are
chance
you-
to see it yet.
I know your job, James, but what is yours?
I'm the divisional manager of foods, but tonight I'm running the store, so I'm store duty manager tonight.
The whole store?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to check it out.
Yeah,
and see
so
how
you
it's
want to know
gone.
what this
So
store is.
congratulations, you must be really pleased.
Yeah, it's going very well.
Good,
Thank
good.
you. Yeah.
That's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Mercedes, £25.
It was,
That's a nice one,
It's
eh?
a really good piece. That.
yeah.
Someone petite.
These are the shelves
me.
that I always go to when I'm in the charity shop.
Yeah. How's today for you guys?
Really good.
Really
Yeah.
A really good day.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice and busy.
Yeah, good. Right, I know. We're a little bit of a mess sometimes.
True charity shop.
So you want to buy this?
Yeah, it's Islamic. It's holy words. Holy words. So it's a very strange place to find something like this. But yeah, I've just picked it up straight away.
And what does it say?
Yeah, it's God's name.
Oh, God's name. Oh, right, which you probably can't say.
Yeah, Allah.
Yeah, are you not supposed to say that? No, it's okay to say? Okay. Tell him what to do. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I included
Okay.
that last bit as an example of me bumbling as I did all the way through this. She said God's name, and I was like, oh, right, she can't say God. Like, I think that's like in Judaism, actually, you know. But she threw me with that God's name. And then weirdly, her daughter then was like, that's not what that says. And they had to Google it, all in Arabic, and I have a picture of like the phone next to it. And so I was a little bit comforted by like, oh, right, just because you're of this faith doesn't mean you are the expert on it either, you know.
So
like,
what did it say?
it did say Allah,
Oh.
yeah. It did say Allah. But I guess, yeah, that was the point, the final point I was going to make about working in religion or anything that you're not an expert of. I think this is such a moment where if you make a misstep, you are going to suffer mightily, right? I mean, if you make any kind of misstep in public or speak wrongly, especially about, you know, a group that you're not a member of, you know, the feeling right now is like that you could just end your whole life. So in a way, I marched into this project with so many things that were unfamiliar to me as a kind of like, fuck that, you know, like that sounds like a terrible life to be living with that much fear. And I mean, God, I can't, you know, there are so many ways that I'd like to say we here all embarrassed ourselves. So many things we didn't know that we learned and were gently schooled on by the different faiths, you know, about what was appropriate and what you know, what the meaning of something was. And we were doing it in work together, you know, so it wasn't about like tweeting something and, you know, alone. No, we were working together. So actually no one was out to get us. It was just It was just a series of sort of like work mistakes that you then work your way through, and then you know each other better, and that's like how life actually is. So there was something in that appealed to me very much a year ago when I began this, about the vulnerability of that, and then I kind of wanted to keep making a space for it, while obviously not speaking for any of these groups like that. You know, I could not do that.
Could I just ask, you kind of mentioned it, but did the groups, did they choose the merchandise, or did you have a role in choosing sort of so you have the kind of Islamic dress and that plate with the inscription on it?
Right. So, the reason why there's so many is, the reason why there are Islamic stuff and why she was like surprised to find that plate there is because, you know, 1/4 of our stuff comes from Islamic Relief, and they're serving, you know, their community. You know, some of the stuff it does. They have like an amazing selection of abayas, you know, that you couldn't find secondhand in very many other places. And so that's in the store. But then, you know, 3/4 of the other goods are from the other stores. I did make a style guide at the start, a really weird, I could have put up a picture of it, style guide that had things like the shoes had to be either very classic or very blingy. I liked pleated skirts. I liked objects that could be interpreted as sculptural but weren't. I liked also, but beyond the lots of religious stuff I liked because it was all mixed together, I also liked just kinky stuff in general. I wanted like clothes for premature babies because my baby was premature, but that's actually really hard to find. Some basic things like winter jackets for kids, I feel like those should never be bought new. They just whip right through them, and everyone should have access to cheap winter coats. And anyway,
also,
so,
yes,
yeah.
importantly, this is the only charity shop in Britain where you can't buy a book by Jeremy Clarkson.
Right, only books by women. That was like a subtle intervention.
Which meant lots of 50 Shades of Grey when I was there today.
We're doing better and better. There's a very beautiful Anais Nin, some Doris Lessing. We have lots of great new stock in there right now, just for the ending. And yeah, I just was like, I didn't mention that much, but I just pictured that slight, like, you couldn't quite put your finger on it when you were a woman looking through the shelves, but just like life was somehow better.